welcome to the Jills of All Trades podcast. And I am Julianne with dirtpatchheaven.com, and I also have a YouTube channel of the same name, Dirt Patch Heaven. And this is Cinnamon.
Hi guys, I'm from YouTube channel Country Crafts, and my website is countrycraftswood.com. Today our show goes in to the method of how and what to say when talking to your daughters, your sons, about choosing the right mate. First, we'll start off the show with our pick of the week Bible verse. Mine is Proverbs 31, verse 26. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. That right there, I don't know. I've met a couple of women before where they astound me. They just sound so kind. They don't get angry, at least that I don't see. I mean, everybody does behind doors and stuff. And whenever I meet those kind of women, I guess it just really encourages me to try and do the same, because I was actually talking to one of my friends. She'll be celebrating her second anniversary in September, and they're having arguments and everything. And I told her, it's really hard in the beginning of marriage to not not pay attention to the tone, but to pay attention to what is being said. But not like I'm a huge veteran. We just celebrated 4 years, but I feel like even on this past year, we've constantly, helped with our communication and stuff. So this verse, saying wisdom comes out of her mouth, and, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. That's something that I am aiming towards. And it's something that I would love if somebody talks to me and then they walk away and they view me as I see other women who just seem like they're kind. And it's not, I don't think I'm fake in any way. There have been some times where I have had to bite my tongue like anybody else, because it's the nice thing to do. Yeah. But I feel as I'm getting older, it's better. I think a lot of my friends when I was growing up in college and everything was kind of in this crowd where girls weren't being there to support each other and build each other up. It was more of a competition, which was just awful. And I think the older you get, the more you're like, why would I ever do that? If I see somebody walking by and their earrings are beautiful, I tell them. Like, I'll be at a grocery store and I'm like, oh, I love your hair. And they'll be like, thanks.
Right.
Because shoot, they dressed up. They put that on, and, somebody has to notice, and it looks good. So why not tell them? We should be encouraging each other. So that, my eye kind of caught that verse today, because I was looking through. We'll be talking about Proverbs 31. So
yes, I love that. I think I think that building each other up is about, it has so much to do with the person's character, whether the people that you see around you are, if you're looking for those opportunities to help each other, or making sure it's only about yourself. And because we're talking about marriage today, I'm always caught off guard when we're talking about the scripture, because I'm always like, I showed up and I forgot the scripture. But there's, I always forget. But I do have a scripture.
That's okay. I was going to say, it doesn't have to go with, what we're talking either. It can be anything, because there's so much knowledge and there's so many awesome things in the Bible. So just pick one.
So true. I always have my scriptures upstairs because of family scripture, and I never have them down here in front of my computer, so I would never remember. But this one that I have today, I'm all about Proverbs. I'm always about Proverbs. So this one is Proverbs 19:14, and I thought this one was so poetic. Houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Every family has its history. Every family has its downfall and its wells of wisdom. And when you get married, you're really starting over, and you have the opportunity to shed all of the baggage that you have from the home that you grew up in, and to start a new life, and you're one with your husband, and you can make that commitment to make everything better and to really follow the Lord in the way that you treat each other, regardless of what your source is. And I think the way you do that is by following the Spirit and really letting the Lord have a place in your heart in that. And it really is, I think marriage is another kind of redemption and being able to heal old scars from maybe things that went on in our close family. Anyway, that's...
And well, something on your verse, actually, I really like it. Something that I kind of thought about is that when it said, those other things are from your parents, but a woman, being from the Lord is our heavenly Father. He is a perfect Father. So it is from, a parent, but, parents, I think a lot of people don't, and I have to be reminded too, everybody does that. Parents aren't perfect. They're people too. They make mistakes. They try their hardest in everything they do. But to have a wife that the Lord chooses, he perfectly pairs people together. I don't think that anybody, I think I would annoy anybody else. Derek's perfect for, those days. And I feel so bad because he gets migraines a lot. And I'm a chatty Cathy. And I feel like, I'll just keep talking. And then he just I'll get no reaction. I'll look at him like, what? And he's like, I have a migraine. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, I'm so sorry. And I completely forget again. So he's definitely patient with me on a lot of avenues. And I'm definitely a babbling brook.
That balance,
yeah.
to have your mate be the one that is eternally tolerant, but also loves the fact that we have these foibles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this week, our woofer left. I got sick this week because I don't do well being away from our house. And so, unfortunately for the woofer, my week was really slowed down. And in the end, she really just kicked it into gear and went out and did a whole bunch of weeding, even though I was asleep on my bed trying to recover. But we found out that the drip systems work exceptionally well inside the straw bale beds, and I outfitted my whole greenhouse with drip lines and other things that will allow me just to turn a switch so that the whole greenhouse and the backyard and the front garden all get watered at the same time, and which means that I'll be able to go out into the back pasture and scythe or get a rabbit hutch put together or get all of the big structural type homesteading stuff that needs to be done, and the straw beds don't need to be weeded. They don't have any weeds in them because they're elevated. They're about 4 feet tall. So no weeding. So the only thing that has to be done is watering, which means that it'll free up about 2 hours every morning.
Wow, that's a huge difference. Are you doing a video on that? Like how you...
I tried. I have a tripod that likes to spin. I swear it's possessed. And somebody suggested that I need to glue it in place because there's a place that's allowed that will let you tighten it, but it's just dysfunctional, and that part just needs to be glued in place so that I can at least move all the other parts.
Right.
And I keep forgetting until I get out there to film, and then of course it starts to spin on me again. So I tried to get video on.
Well, the reason why I was asking is because I watched your one video that talked about, being up early and stuff, and you said, it's a lot longer to do this by taking the watering can and stuff. But that's what I do from my garden is I have to walk all the way over to the spout on the side of the house, which is, yay high, and then I have to bend over, while I'm holding it while it's filling it with water, and then I have to walk over, and then I do every single row. So it's...
Do you not have a hose?
I do, but the way it is that I don't have a nozzle for spraying. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that the way that it's set up, I feel like if I need to stretch it to get all the way to the far end, that it's going to run over plants and stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And I do like that I am just hitting the row part so that, weeds are growing regardless because I haven't been able to do the newspaper thing in the middle. Once I do that, that'll definitely help. But I feel like they don't grow as much because the water's just going onto where the plants are and stuff.
Very true.
So that's why I was like, That's why I was wondering if you had a video on it, because that'd be cool to do.
I almost have a video on it, but the mulching is working. We have some grass that's coming up in with all of our everything, but it's very minimal.
Your carrots and something else, wasn't it?
Spinach.
And spinach, yeah.
But it's not very much. There's a little bit of grass coming up, but everything came in thick enough now that the vegetables themselves are holding the weeds back, and keeping any light from getting to new ones. And so it's been an exceptional success. And now that the soaker hoses are on there, I'm really excited to see what the outcome will be.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We last night we actually had a big storm that it stretched within 4 states. It was over Ohio, Indiana, Illinois,
Oh, wow.
and Michigan.
That's huge.
Yeah, there was actually somebody said there was a tornado that was 20 miles away from us.
Wow.
And it was lightning and it was raining, and I was born in Oklahoma. Like, I love storms. I can't tell you how many times we saw the movie Twister when I was growing up. And like, anytime it'd be a storm, my mom would be like, get inside, because we would like want to run outside, and we're like, why?
Yeah.
And so I absolutely love storms. That's the whole reason why when we talked about the porch and stuff, you know, I'd love to sit and watch storms. But anyways, so we had a storm last night, and a lot of people, I was kind of worried because, you know how I said last year my whole garden flooded. I was like, oh man, I hope it does not flood. But, you know, since we did the rows this year and they were planted kind of up, I figured, you know, Derek wanted us to try it this year instead of doing like close together niched, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we planted it, because he said if we do get a big storm, the water's going to go down. But today, this morning I went out there and I looked before work, and there's no puddles or anything. Like, our ground was so dry, because I was very, very excited about that. Because there's been several days where they've said that we're supposed to get rain and we didn't get any.
Yeah.
It would say like 40% chance and then nothing.
Yeah.
So it's been really, really dry here. And then we were getting notifications on our phones for a flash flood, like, you know, because the conditions were favorable for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we were completely good. So as far as, I'm trying to think, the last time we talked about the garden, I did get some weeding done. But I have a lot more to do. We've been busy on getting, you know, this podcast out. So, and just kind of to keep everybody updated on everything. Our goal is to have our suggestive buys in a link on our webpage, and our ebooks linked to our podcast by the 4th of July. And from there on out, when we have a new podcast, we can come out, or when the new podcasts come out, we will be able to have a new ebook come out with it. So once we're all caught up, because we had to set up the webpage, we had to do a bunch of social media stuff to get it out. So now we're just playing catch up on the ebooks and the suggestive buys, so that anything that we mention in the podcast, if anybody wants to, you know, purchase the book or whatever, you know, things that we suggest, they can go to a link that'll be in our description and they can get it.
And they should be fun, kind of like little in a nutshell of the important information that we felt kind of all fit into the same category for that podcast.
Right. And if there's any pictures, we'll be putting those in too. So I'm excited about that. But nobody make fun of my drawing on my cake for my mom. I do want to put that though.
Cute. I thought it was super cute.
Maybe a little by little I can explain the different stories. I will explain one. If you guys look at the cake, there's 6 different sections on it because there's 6 of us. And so each one is a memory with each kid and my mom and how funny it is. So mine, it says run cinnamon, and there's a picture of a car of guys, and I have my hand over my eyes like, oh my gosh. And my mom has like her hands over her mouth because she's trying to yell like, go run cinnamon, because this is what happened. I was coming home from cheerleading and I was walking down our street, and mom and dad were leaving to go on a walk, and I was of course older and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, bye guys. So they start walking and they're down the street a little bit and they're about ready to go around the corner. And then I hear like this car coming around the corner and it's a car full of guys. And my mom's looking at them, then she's looking towards me. And she's like, she said that she just felt compelled to be like, run, Cinnamon. Like she was serious. And I'm like, Mom, I know these people. It's okay. And so after she got home, like, we would always joke about that with her. Run, Cinnamon! And she's like, ha ha ha.
Aren't
but
those family stories so crazy? Every family has them. Those, just the weird stories. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so great, especially when people bring them up. Like, you are going to love when your girls get older and they just say, hey, Mom, remember when you caught us on that cage, like on YouTube?
Yeah. And we have
we were on
documentation of it too, is the scary part. Okay, so if you guys are interested in the podcast, make sure to share them with friends, right? We need to make sure that it's getting spread instead of, if you're the only one who listens to it, it doesn't go anywhere. So make sure to share it with people. And what are some of the places that they can share them? Do you know, Cinnamon?
Just anywhere on social media. We have our webpage, which has all the podcasts on there. If you go on iTunes and you rate it, that helps us out. You guys can share it on your Facebook. We also have a Facebook page now, Jills of All Trades Podcast. And we are going to be putting questions up there. Like, when we decide what the next podcast is going to be, we'll go ahead and say, you know, the next podcast is going to be about this. Put your comments here. So, like, if you have any questions about the upcoming podcast, that way, you know, while you're listening to this podcast, you're not like, oh, man, I wish they would have covered this. You can know ahead of time and let us know. So you can also go on our Instagram, or you can be old school and you can call a friend and be like, hey, there is this really cool podcast out and you should listen to it.
Right, exactly. And then let's see, you had noticed that we did have one question from one of the listeners, and her question was about raised flower beds and how to prep the soil. And the concern that we had was that we don't know what kind of soil you have. Do you have alkaline soil? Do you have acidic soil? Alkaline soil, you add a lot of manure or a lot of mulch, and with acidic soil, I believe it's lime. Isn't it lime that you add if you have acidic soil? Alkaline soil tends to be in the desert. Acid soil tends to be in places that you get a lot of water, that you get a lot of rain. So it kind of depends.
She was in Oregon. I wasn't sure. Sorry to interrupt. She's in Oregon, so I wasn't sure if all of Oregon has the same, you know, soil type, or if they have different. Because I know, like in Ohio, some places are sandy, some have clay. So it just depends. Like, and I know somebody who lives like maybe 10 miles away from us, and they have a lot of sand. Where, you know, if it's closer to our house, it's clay. Yeah. And that's just within, you know, miles within each other. So
yeah, it really depends. It so depends on what your soil situation is, because raised beds might not be a good idea for you if you have very hot, dry conditions. They first invented raised beds in places where you get waterlogged, where you have a lot of flooding, and it was to keep the roots above that saturation point so that the roots could breathe. And that's where raised beds came from. It wasn't necessarily to make it easier for the plants. It was to keep the plants out of the drenched, soaking water. And so as far as raised beds, it all really just depends on your soil and what your conditions are. But let's see. So did you get the name of who had asked that, Cinnamon?
She had an Instagram where it was 33 something. Okay. I remember there was numbers and letters in it. Well, wait, what was it? Hold on, I can actually look real quick.
Or if she recognizes,
I'm sure
that.
She knows.
So if you're listening, make sure to clarify to us what exactly your soil is like, because it changes depending on what you're going to be growing in it. And then also, we did have a poll up on our Instagram about what you guys think we should be doing with our property, whether we should sell it, keep it, get a farmhand, or let some of it die back. And That'll be interesting over time to see what everybody thinks we should do. But shall we move on to our topic at hand?
Sure. So we're talking about dating, and a lot of people call it a game of dating, but I don't think it's really a game. I think it's rather, knowing information, knowing what you want, knowing what you should do also. So we'll definitely talk about those things. Something, and the whole reason we got on this topic is because I was talking on another podcast about how, I wonder what my mom could have said to me to make me think differently, or to stop me from, say, there was this one guy I dated that wasn't a Christian, and I knew it, and I think I just wanted to try something different because nothing else worked, which is the worst mentality.
Right?
It definitely shows my maturity level at that point.
I did the same thing. I decided to go off the road a little bit for just one guy, and it kind of does a number on you.
It does. It emotionally, like it was awful.
Yeah.
But I do know something that happened when I was younger. I was a teenager, and that kind of stuck through me, throughout my years of dating. And what happened was, in Michigan, they have a place called Miracle Camp, and it's like a summer retreat camp for Christian, boys and girls to go to and stuff in high school. And I was camp aide there, and before I was a camp aide there, and I went, there was this one counselor, it was a girls' night, and we were all in a room, and she was one of those, like, she was beautiful, she was so kind and, like, awesome, and then she told us about, before she was saved, how she had an abortion, and oh, it was so, and then after that, the innocence that she had was restored through Jesus, and how when she started dating after that, she didn't go to the place where, oh, I've done this and there's no way just looked completely down on herself. Like she recovered from it. She grew, in Jesus, and it completely helped her through it. And she said what she was doing is she began to daily pray for her future husband. And that was the first time that I had heard about that. And I was like, huh. I'm like, well, I just sat there and thought about it, and I'm like, okay, I guess I can do that. I mean, it'll be kind of weird because I don't know their name.
Right.
Or anything like that. And Derek and I, after we got married, I think this is around the time of his motorcycle accident. Around that same time, we figured out that I was praying for him. Mm-hmm. Around that time. I didn't even know him or anything, but it was right around the time of his accident, and here I am praying for him.
Right.
So I thought that was just one of the coolest things. So I think that when you pray for your future husband as a teenager, it gets you more invested in them. Like, they become more real to you, like, even though you don't know their name or anything. So I think that would definitely be, a huge thing to do. But there was definitely one thing that I just said a lot of definitelys. It absolutely stuck out in my mind that my mom said was, I think I was maybe 15 or 16, and she said, I wanted to date this guy that was 19. And she's like, nope. And I'm like, Mom, why? And she's like, that is a huge age difference. I'm like, it's only this many years. And she goes, no, I'm talking about maturity wise. And I'm like, no, and I was trying to argue with her or whatever. And she's like, Cinnamon, do you know that there's a part in your brain that doesn't fully develop until you're 25? And this part of your brain deals with long-term consequences. So while you're 16 and you think that you've thought it through, you haven't. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so whatever. But then she told me that several times, and I'm like, and so I believed her, and I'm like, oh. And then I read it in a book, because I was going to teach, so I was going to take my praxis and stuff. And it was in one of the early childhood education books. And it is true. There is a part of your brain that doesn't fully develop until you're 25, and it deals with long-term consequences. So that's why, and all these people before they're 25, they make those huge decisions. They figure out who they're going to marry. They figure out, what they're going to major in college. Like it's a tricky time frame. You know what I mean?
It is.
And so that definitely helped me, because I think when I was 17 and 18, even when I was going to make a decision, I kind of thought about it a little bit more, than if I didn't know that fact. So I would say that would definitely be something, during the talk that you would have with your daughters, to let them know, hey, this isn't just mom saying this, it's a true fact. Yeah. So you really need to think about how this is going to affect everybody. And yeah.
I 100% agree with that age thing. John and I both at the time, I was 26 and he was 27 when we got married, and we started dating when I was 25. I had just turned 25. And it really was like a switch in my brain. I remember, and John, we both talked about and looked at each other like, why is it that we were suddenly so much more mature at 25 and 26 to be able to look at each other and have the conversations we needed, where before it was so based on emotion and and the spur of the moment of enjoying the feeling of being in love. But when we were 25, we were able to look at it analytically and say, are we a good match for each other? I know for me, the church that I grew up in, the rule was from the leaders that you did not date until you were 16, and that you didn't steady date or kind of pair off and date one person in particular until you were ready to be looking at getting married. And
that's a great rule.
It was
that really
a great
is.
rule. And my parents really stuck with it for a really long time, but I graduated from high school really early. I had barely turned 17 when I graduated from high school and started in college. And my parents, they were Christian, kind of believed in get married early so you're not making mistakes as far as like your morality and everything. And so once I graduated, barely turned 17, they kind of let go of all that, and they didn't necessarily give me a curfew anymore. And I was allowed to go out on single dates now. And it's not that I got into trouble, but I do remember being confused at that kind of line of demarcation from graduating from high school and going to college, that I was assumed to be mature enough to be alone with a boy at that point.
Yeah.
And while I didn't make any big mistakes or anything, there wasn't any immorality going on. It was a matter of, I was with college guys. I was 17 and I was with college guys, and they were decent men. I never dated one that, at that point in time, I always dated somebody that was a Christian, and they were very respectful men, but I was so immature. And some of them were old enough to be married, and they wanted to marry me, and I would get engaged. I was engaged 7 times before I was proposed to by Mr. Dirt. And I said yes to I think I said yes to all of them. And I'd be engaged for a couple weeks, and then the seriousness of the situation would come home to me, or I would ask for advice from my dad, and he would be like, well, these are some things that maybe you want to look at about your fiance, that maybe you don't want to marry somebody that has this characteristic. And I was extremely innocent. This wasn't something where, in modern times, you get engaged and it means you're having sex and that kind of thing. And that wasn't the case with me. Some of these people I was engaged to, I never even kissed them. It was just a matter of, I was just so innocent. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being innocent. I think that a parental control or a parental involvement into the dating life until you're actually married is vital, because if you want to have daughters and sons that don't make some of those bigger mistakes, it takes some guidance to see some of those footfalls and those holes that you can fall into. And so if you go from high school and suddenly the parent assumes that you're mature enough to handle this now, it's not, it's you miss out on fun by dating too soon,
know that parents probably feel like, once their kids graduate, then, it's not their place to say anymore or anything like that. If that is the case, that the relationship between the daughter and like the mom, hey, I'm 18, I don't want to, whatever, I would definitely make sure that before they leave the house that you go on a long walk and you just talk to them, and you tell them, hey, these are some things that these are red flags. If you see any of these, then, I always had in my mind, the one scenario that I would be my go-to if I could see myself marrying someone or not. And that was, if I got married to this person and we had kids, would this person know to pray over my kids when they were sick? Mm-hmm. Like sit down beside them, put their hand on their forehead and pray over them, or would I have to ask them to do it? Like, would they do it on their own? That was my biggest thing. And so for me, like I said, in another time, the 3 months, after 3 months, I'm just like, nope, can't see it, Yeah. And so that was a huge deal. You know what I mean? It's a lot more than when you start to date someone and you're like, oh, well, I'm attracted to them, or they give me the attention I need. Those are great things, but what happens when you're both old and wrinkly? Like, yeah. You're not going to be talking about how great you look. I mean, the conversation has to be there. You have to have a relationship with God. You have to have somebody who is invested in you. And oh my goodness, there was a time in college, and I, even looking back at this, I'm like, man, when I tell teenagers this now, and I'm like, seriously, if he is not in a place where he can tell other people, or ask you out because we're dating. I don't know what we are. We're dating, but we're not, right. Like that whole bull. Okay. Yeah. If a guy is interested in you, he'll claim you before anybody else can. Right. There's no, I think wishy-washy. We're dating, or we're talking. We're talking. Yeah. Well, you're talking to me right now. What does that mean? Like, and I actually went through that phase with my friends where I'd start talking to a guy and he wouldn't ask me out, and we would hang out and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't like this, because it makes me feel like you're trying to hide me, and that's not how it works. Like, I'm not, you're obviously not into me if you're, and that was actually a common thing with a lot of my friends and a lot of people that they talk to and stuff. Like, you would have certain people that you would see as couples, but it's just ridiculous. You know what I mean? That was one of the things that was my ground rule with John, because I really, really liked him, and we met at church, and I had just come out of my one relationship where he wasn't a Christian, where that was really what happened. It was like, I didn't really know if we were dating at some points because there wasn't that mutual caring acknowledgement. And so, but that was the one relationship I'd ever had where I asked him out. Every other time, my mom had always said, if a boy likes you enough, he will ask you out. When you start chasing the boys, that is when they don't really have to decide whether or not they like you. They just kind of fall into it. And so with John, I didn't ask him out. I didn't call him. I waited and liked him for 6 months, and I just sat and waited for like anytime now he's going to ask me out, because I like him and I smile at him all the time, and he needs to just ask me out. But I didn't, and it meant that when he did, he had to decide. He was brave enough to ask me out. He had to like me well enough to do some of the chasing. To do the chasing. And then I really feel like for a man, that's really important to not have a girl fall into your lap, because then you don't have to decide if you like her. You just have her companionship because she is dripping all over you, and she wants all your attention. So you never have to look at her square in the face and say, I really actually don't like her. Why am I here? Because when I was growing up, my mom was like, even if a guy says that he loves you, she's like, don't listen to that lie. If he loved you, he wouldn't try to get you in bed. Yeah. She's like, so there's none of that. And I'm like, oh no, I know, And I thought it was funny because when I was in college and stuff, like, guys didn't even try that. It was just automatically, hey, you want to hook up? And I'd just be like,
Really?
oh, no.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
and you know, it's kind of funny because I was listening to this on the radio today. They were talking about millennials, and they said it's between the age of 19 and 34. And I thought that it was 19 to like 29. So I'm like, oh, I'm not a millennial. I'm a millennial. I didn't even know it.
And I barely missed the cutoff. That's funny. 2 years shy. I'm not a millennial. So what are
I
they? The
don't,
Y2Kers or something? What are they
I don't
called?
know, but
I don't
like,
know.
it's funny because all I hear about millennials is that they're whiny and this and this. And I'm like, I'm not whiny. Like, am I whiny?
Right? You're no, but I mean, you're like and I think it. No matter what generation you're in, it's a category, but it doesn't mean that I really feel like a lot of Christian parents try to pull their children out of the current flow, the current stream of consciousness, and to realign them to true principles. And thus, I do not think that parents that are involved and are really engaged with their
Yeah.
kids have that problem of kids being that
Right.
stereotype, because they're not a stereotype. The parents were involved. It wasn't just that they went to school and came back and all they ever
Right.
did was watch television, which all can turn people into
They were talking
the
about
same thing.
how,
But
you know, that generation of millennials are all turning away from God and stuff. And I was thinking about it, and there were several people that I grew up with that went to my high school, and I see on their Facebook now, and they don't believe in God. And I'm just like, how can you be at a point where, you know, you were a Christian and then you can, knowing what you know, and then turning away, which kind of says a little bit about their relationship with them, with God in the first place. Like, did they really believe? Because I don't know. That's going to be a completely new situation or topic, but
well, and it's true, and I think it has so much to do with who do you
yeah,
surround yourself with. Are you looking for uplifting entertainment? Are you with uplifting spiritual people? Um, I you become who you associate with, and so it doesn't mean that you shouldn't associate with anybody that isn't exactly the same as you, but it might mean that, well, if you're associating with people that are not of God, and you're not reading your scriptures, and you're not
you're
going to
not having a
church,
relationship with God at all. And
you
it's
know,
very easy when you're not having
yeah,
a relationship with
yeah,
somebody for you to dismiss them.
exactly. And so it's, you always want to associate with others and never judge, Christian or not Christian. You don't want to be somebody that judges. But
Right.
if you want to hold on to joy and light and peace in your own life, you need to make sure you're feeding your spiritual life so that you can take that spiritual life to others, rather than being able to feed off of an empty source. You become an empty source when God is not in your life. There's a
Void.
continual, there's a void, and there's a continual supply as long as you're close to him. But you have to feed from him, not from your own source.
I
You
think
know.
I'm very well known for getting off topic, so sorry about that. But I did want to say also, when you are talking to your daughters while they're in the process of dating somebody, hopefully you can establish a relationship where you guys can talk about anything, because my mom was always someone I could talk to about stuff, but I don't know why I didn't. But I did date this person, the one who wasn't a Christian, and I would be scared that I was texting him too much,
Hmm.
because I felt like, oh, am I being annoying? Am I texting too much or anything like that? And sometimes he wouldn't respond. Where when I first started dating Derek, he would text me first, and I'm like, oh, okay. So then I text back,
Right.
and we wouldn't go one day without texting each other or talking to each other or anything like that. And even now, like, it's so natural, and it feels so great, because I remember my sister came to this is when I lived in Texas. My sister came to Texas to visit me, and she was married. This is right before she got married, and her fiance, she's like, I'm gonna go in the other room and I'm gonna call him real quick, and I'm like, oh, really? And she's like, yeah. And so she went off into the other room. And for me, that was weird because when I was dating this person, if he was going home
Hmm.
to go visit with his parents and stuff, I didn't hear from him at all.
Wow.
And if I was going home to Ohio to visit my family, I would call him and he wouldn't answer. And like it
Wow.
just and I when you're in the relationship, you don't think about, you're like, oh, okay, this is how it is and stuff. But we really need to train up our young girls to know that that is not right.
Well, and John is the same way. And for me, that was one of the things I loved the most about him. There was never any question about how much he cared. He didn't
Right.
have to put up this big macho front and act like he didn't care. And it was always a matter. I know this sounds horrible, but I kind of feed off of it a little bit. I'm a little bit of a standoffish, shy person. And the fact that John is always the one to offer a cuddle and the one to always call me or text me or want just a little bit more of my time feeds my soul in a way that being with someone who's like me, who's a little more standoffish, it's been such a blessing to me. My dad is somewhat standoffish physically. He's just he's a very focused person, and so I did date a couple of boys that were like that, where I'm pretty sure it was about the physicality of it, that they thought that I was pretty, and they didn't really notice anything beyond that. And so when I needed interaction or affection of any kind, it was a bother, like kind of like a waiter that keeps coming over and asking if you need more water. Kind of
Right.
kind of like you didn't really fit into their personal paradigm, you know? And
Mhm.
so I agree. I think it's why what my mom always suggested worked so well was she's like, don't ever chase a boy. If he likes you well enough to ask you out, you know that he likes you. But if you ask him out, you don't really know. You don't really know if he cared enough to fight to get your number, to call you, to be involved in your life, to care that much.
That's really good
Um,
advice
it
between,
is.
mother and daughter.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you've already kind of I'm sure that you've thought about it, when the girls get a little bit older and you have to have that talk with them and stuff. Is there anything like that you've thought about
Um,
mentioning to them?
let's see. What is some of that? We have talked to them just a little bit as far as we've told them we think it's really important that whoever they marry, that they love God, and that they need to dress modestly now, so that the person that they date sees them as a person rather than as an object. Which, I mean, there's scientific studies out there that say when a woman is dressed immodestly, the man can't help it. His brain actually shuts off in seeing her as a person, and all it's like he's seeing a carrot. He sees carrot. When he sees bikini, all he sees is chest. He doesn't look at her and say, "Oh, your name's Diane and you like karaoke." He sees chest. And so we're
Mhm.
like, if you will keep yourself modest, then your future spouse will see you as a person, and rather than as a commodity.
Mhm.
Um, and,
It's
and and
very
that's about as far as we've gone.
But you know what? They're still very young, and I think it's also important to kind of factor in different stuff that you would tell them a little at a time, so that they can get it embedded in their head instead of like
Exactly.
overwhelming them with all this
Yeah.
information. Hey, you're about to date. This is everything you need to know.
Right. Yeah.
Something that we did for us. There's between my mom and dad, which they just celebrated their 42nd anniversary.
Hmm.
Um, there's one boy and five girls. So you can imagine like that many girls. And don't feel bad for my brother. When we had slumber parties, he didn't leave the house. Like he loved it. Everybody knew, oh, hey Gabe. Everybody loves my brother.
Yeah.
He's such a kind guy too. He's awesome. So with that many girls, you have to have rules. And so for us growing up, there was no riding in a car with a guy, like
Yep.
until you were 16. And even then, I'll tell you what happens after you're 16. So there's no riding in a car with a guy, no talking on the phone. Like if somebody called me and they had a question about math, I would, my mom would answer the phone. She's like, "What's this about?" And he would, tell her. She's like, "Okay." And so she would stand in front of me, facing me while I was on the phone. And as soon as they would get off after I tell them about math and they'd start talking, I'm like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
And so then I, got off the phone or whatever. Because there was a couple times like someone would call me, they'd be asking about, oh, so and so, and I'm like, I gotta go because I didn't want, to get in trouble or anything like that. So no riding in cars with guys, no talking on the phone with guys, no dating until you're 16. And then when I was 16, my dad had what everybody in our hometown called the interview. So if you wanted to date me, you had to drive your car with just my dad in the passenger seat. And while you're driving, so number one, you're nervous. I know they had to have been nervous.
Right.
Like a driver's test. So while you're driving, he's asking you, what are your intentions with my daughter? What's your 5-year plan? How do you know you're going to heaven? Right. And just like all these questions, you know what I mean? To really get to know them before I could even go on a date and know them myself.
Yeah.
And so I didn't date anybody in high school.
Yeah.
And there was one guy I dated my senior year, but this was at the very end of my senior year. And since I was the youngest, they actually didn't interview him. He was a Christian, and they met him and stuff. And some of the older sisters, they were totally joking, but they're like, isn't he going to get an interview, Dad? And he's like, no, I think she's old enough. And they're like, what? And he's like, are you really upset? And they're like, no, but still, because I was the baby or whatever. Yeah. But I'm so glad my dad did that, because I feel, even though I made some mistakes in who I dated when I was in college, I feel like I was able to have more fun with friends. It was more focused around my relationship with my friends when I was in high school. And that's how it should be. I mean, unless, you have those rare occasions where people meet and fall in love and, marry their high school sweetheart and stuff. But,
Well, I have to say that I think that's brilliant. The way that my dad handled it was, once I was 16, I had to date 5 other guys in between. If I had a boy I liked, I had to find 5 other guys to date in between dating him again, which means I couldn't get attached to anybody. I could date as much as I wanted to. It had to be in a group situation. There was no pairing off. It was all double dates and school dances and stuff like that. So it was always chaperoned. But I had to go out and meet 5 other boys. And so I dated a ton in high school because I had to find those 5 other boys to ask to Sadie Hawkins or something.
Wait, so if you liked somebody before you could date them, you had to date 5
I could
guys?
date him one time. If he asked me out, I could go on one date with him, like a school dance or something.
Right.
And it had to be a double date. And then I had to go on 5 other dates with 5 other different boys before I could date him again. Because it's hard to build that kind of pairing off relationship if you are friends and dating, because there was no pairing off, there was no kissing, holding hands, anything. It was just very, very sweet, childish fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had boys that I liked, but I couldn't fixate on any one of them because I had to find 5 other ways to get a boy to ask me to go out on some other simple date before I could get back to the one that I really cared about. And so I never had any, I didn't get kissed in high school. I never got kissed in high school. There was no holding hands. There was none of that. It was all so innocent. And my dad, I loved it. My dad would go out on dates with me. My parents would double date with us if I couldn't find another date to go with us. And it was so fun because I thought my parents were amazing. It was family fun, and there was no intimacy. It was just fun,
Yeah, because even when you, I guess I was going to say, even when you're married and stuff, you have to learn how to be with somebody in front of other people too. It's not all physical. It's, because once you're really old and the physical stuff stops, you have to be able to have a relationship and be able to, not be a hermit all the time, even though it's very tempting.
Right? To just be that hermit that just stays with their spouse. John and I have a tendency to do that. We prefer. I get very, very shy in public situations, And I think it's really funny, but I always go to him for a recharge. He'll be sitting there having a conversation. I'll come sit on his lap and just sit there for 5 minutes, and somehow his energy reassures me so that I can go back out and have more conversations with people. But that kind of to be able to go out and be around other people is so much more fun when you have a special spouse that is really your everything, you know?
Yeah, and I really like it completely. Derek, breaks the mold, and we were kind of talking about it a little bit earlier, but just that that confidence that he gives me, that I don't have to worry about him looking at other people, or him, maybe he's bored with me, or like I don't worry about that. Like, I have a confidence that if we go somewhere and he's talking to someone, he's being nice, I can go off and I can talk to somebody else. Like, I don't have to be like, where's he at? What's he doing? Does he want to leave, or does he, what I mean? Like, there's none of that worry, which, my gosh, I'm so glad I'm not in the dating anymore. Right? Like, I found the perfect person. He does exist for me. And my mom would say that all the time. She's like, there really is somebody out there who will meet all your needs, and that's kind of something I wanted to talk about too, is that, whenever you're talking to like one of your friends, when like we're all dating and stuff, and like, and you're like, oh my gosh, she's not good enough for you and all that stuff. Sometimes you have to think, are you good enough for that other person? It is not one-sided. So when you're having the talk and you're training your children and your daughters and your sons on how to, how you should be treated, also don't neglect the other side, like how we should treat other people. Just because we get upset doesn't mean that they should, be patient with us all the time and, hear us out. What happens when you need to be the one who hears them out? What happens when you have to be the one that is calm and then they can, react off of your reaction? What happens when you have to step up and you have to be the one, who just is the example of what to do, or, take the reins on getting that good communication and working on it and stuff, So,
and I think that gives a really good insight into mother-daughter relationships and father-son relationships, is that we aren't the same. Men and women aren't the same, and we have different needs and different impulses. And for my girls, the thing that I would want to really train them in before they got married was to eat. Make sure that you feed yourself. Make sure that you're taking vitamins, so that, especially magnesium and calcium, because they help a lot when you're in your menses, so that you're not as emotional, and to educate your children about things like hormones, as far as like how they affect you personally, because a lot of times with women, we take our hormones very personally, and in a marriage, they can be really rough on a marriage if you're not aware how your hormones make you behave. It puts a
were you gonna say how your hormones make you crazy?
Yeah, how your hormones make you crazy. If you don't recognize it as such, and instead you just see it as that you hate your husband sometimes and you're not sure why, I think so much of that is a lack of education for women, that to watch for your body's signs that it needs better nutrition, and as you're going into marriage, to recognize that once you start having kids, that also if you're not taking care of your body, when you start to have kids, it takes a toll on your health, and that kind of drain on your health can take a toll on your marriage. And so teaching young girls to be super responsible for their bodies and to be really tuned to the needs of their bodies, because it's like our bodies are like a machine. We need certain things to function. When we put greater demands on our bodies, like having babies and not sleeping at night because of babies and this kind of thing, that by women being more responsible, we can help our marriages be stronger by not putting those emotional drains on the relationship we have with our spouse.
Right. That's actually a very good point.
And I don't know what the other side is for men. But I'm sure there's another side for men on lessons that get passed down from father to son about whatever it is that boys deal with more. Maybe that would be hormones. I don't know, because I've never been a boy.
I think it's the whole respect issue. Like, guys, like, respect is their big thing that they want. What was women's? Was it, like, to be provided for? Like, it's, oh, what book was that? I'm trying to think. There was actually, when I was in Texas and I was kind of going through my bad relationship, one of my friends in Texas, and I had slidden away from God a little bit. I still would say I was a Christian. I wasn't going to church, though. I was dating someone who wasn't a Christian. But anytime somebody would talk about God, my ears would perk up and I'd want to talk about him, and my sister Kana and her best friend of over 20 years, so she's like another sister to me, came to Texas to visit me, and we were sitting outside on the porch just talking, and Kana's like, because it says in the Bible, da 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 da, and I just started bawling, and they look at each other and they're like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I miss talking about God. And then I told them that night, I'm like, I'm coming home. And I'm like, call Mom, I'm going to come home. And they're like, whoa, don't you want to think about this? And I'm like, no, I'm ready to come home. Yeah. And so I called my mom, told her I was coming home. She was elated. And one of my friends in Texas, Karen, she gave me this book. And I think, what is it? Princess Unaware, I think is what it was called. Mm-hmm. And it was talking about how girls should be treated, and it had different devotions in it. So I remember I would call my mom from Texas, and she would stay on the phone with me for a couple nights in a row every week for like 2 hours while I read through, while I was reading this book and we were doing a devotion together. And that made a huge difference. It helped me get through what I was going, right before I came home and stuff. And so just, I don't know, just being able to listen and, cause you can tell somebody, you can tell your child, I'm here if you want to talk about it, but I don't know, man, parenting can be tough.
It is so tough. Riding that fine line between telling them that they're being stupid and being there and telling them that it's their decision and that you love them and that you'll always be there for them. I know my dad always kind of erred on the side of you're being stupid, and my mom always erred on the side of I love you, I'll always be there for you. And I think moms and dads make such a good balance in that kind of love, so that we have that eternal nurturing and yet the wisdom of having that other opinion that says, you might want to rethink this, honey. This might not be a good idea for you, Yeah,
and I think it's just very important that as a parent, you practice how you can say it in love, because nothing turns away a teenager faster than feeling like they're being a little child, because of how their parent is talking to them. I do know that was something, that kind of got in the way. I feel like my relationship with my mom as an adult now, I still can tell, it's night and day. Not saying she was bad or anything, but there isn't that tone. It's more of, I know you can do whatever you want, but if you want my opinion, this is what it is. And she's, the more and more older we get, she only gives it if I ask, which is, I know it must be hard. Because when you care for someone and you know what the right answer is, or what you're, just do this, you want to just tell them and stuff, but you have to be respectful and, have that kind of relationship with them. But I was going to go over Proverbs 31 a bit, but I'm just going to leave that reading for everybody. The woman, the Proverbs 31 woman is like, my mom always says, no pressure. But, it just kind of shows us what we can and what we are capable of being if we are living the way God wants us to live. If we're living by his standards, we could be this awesome woman who, what was it? In her tongue. Yeah, in her tongue is the law of kindness. Yeah, it talks about cooking. It talks about everything. And it's, whoops. My computer. It's definitely, just read it. I can't emphasize how important it is to read it slowly, and read it with confidence that if you are living with a Christ-centered relationship, you can be that woman, even on your hardest days where, there's hope that you can, because God would not ask it of you if it wasn't possible, but it is only possible with him. If you'd like to support our podcast, click on the Patreon link on our webpage. Why do I always stumble right at the end of our thing? I don't know why I do that.
Right?
Anyways.
I think it's because our website is so long, and every time I look at it, I kind of go, It's just a lot to remember. So many websites, so many links, so many YouTube channels.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess a good way to memorize it is that it's just called Jills of All Trades. Mm-hmm. And then all the other social media has Jills of All Trades podcast. So yeah. Instagram, Jills of All Trades podcast. Website, jillsofalltradespodcast.com. Email, if you needed to email us or anything, jillsofalltradespodcast.com. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Or at gmail.com. And so then
Jills of All Trades podcast at gmail.com.
Yes.
Okay, so, and if you want to just listen to the podcast, you can go to iTunes to do that, and please make sure to rate us there, and that's just a really easy place to find it.
And Julianne's YouTube is Dirtpatch Heaven, and that's also the name of her website, only it's dirtpatchheaven.com, and that's spelled with one H.
Mm-hmm. And go to, in fact, Cinnamon and Derek had the cutest vlogs the last couple of days, and their YouTube channel is Country Crafts.
It's just Country Crafts for the YouTube, but it's countrycraftswood.com for the webpage, because Country Crafts was already taken on the website.
And it's super cute. Their vlog is super cute. They're so cute together. I just sit there and giggle while Derek tries to, I don't know if he's trying to irritate you, Cinnamon, or if it's just that he thinks you're really cute, because I just think they're absolutely cute. And him losing everything and sitting there trying to figure out where the oil was out in some shed. And he's done a really good job with the editing, with like the music and everything. It usually takes people a lot longer to kind of get off the ground with that, but they're really good.
I will definitely tell him you said that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so thanks for joining us. And remember, you only have to start one little step in order to be moving towards whatever it is that you're working for. You know, if you have some personal change you want to make, if you want to start a garden, if you want to have a happier marriage, it all starts with just one little step, one direction. And I think a lot of times that comes with prayer. If there are things in your life that you're struggling with that you feel are really important and you just can't seem to get to them, I think that prayer is the way to make that first step and to say, is this the most important thing that I could be doing? So make sure to check out our podcast. And again, make sure if you have any questions or things you'd actually like us to cover in future podcasts, make sure to send us a line somewhere on one of our fun places to reach us. We love you guys, and we'll talk to you later.